Nike is the world's largest sportswear brand, earning around millions of dollars every day. World-class athletes like Ronaldo and Rafael Nadal use their products. But would you believe that the man who built Nike was once a failed athlete who started his business by selling shoes out of the trunk of his car? This is the story of Nike's founder, Phil Knight. Phil Knight was born in 1938 in a small town called Portland in the US. From a young age, he was a fast runner, and his ultimate dream was to become a great athlete. He worked hard on his running in school and college, winning several races. Along with running, Phil also continued his education, completing his MBA in 1962. He still wanted to continue running, but one morning, during his practice run, reality hit him. After dedicating his entire youth to running, he had become one of the best athletes in his state. But he could not reach national or international levels. Sadly, he was good, but not great. By this time, Phil was 24 years old, and there was no more scope to improve in athletics. So with a heavy heart, he accepted that it was the end of his athletic career. He had failed to achieve his dream of becoming an elite athlete, but he still wanted to do something that would keep him close to sports. Like every runner, Phil was deeply connected to his running shoes. That's when he decided to start a shoe business. Phil remembered that during his MBA, he had studied and written a detailed research paper on the running shoe business. His research showed that Japanese camera companies had disrupted the American camera market by offering better quality at lower prices. According to his research, Japanese shoes could similarly disrupt the US shoe market and potentially overtake big companies like Adidas and Puma. Starting a business based on a college project was a huge risk, but Phil had no other options. He decided to import Tiger brand shoes from Japan and sell them in the US. Tiger shoes were manufactured by a Japanese company called Onitsuka. So, Phil gathered all his savings and booked a flight to Japan. When he finally reached Japan, he called Onitsuka's office and managed to get an appointment. Before the meeting, Phil was nervous. A shy and introverted young man had suddenly set out to form a partnership with a big Japanese shoe company. To make things more difficult, an Onitsuka executive asked Phil for the name of his company at the very start of the meeting. Somehow, an image of the blue ribbons he'd won in races came to Phil's mind, and the words "blue ribbon" came out of his mouth. He said he was representing a company called Blue Ribbon Sports, even though such a company didn't yet exist. But the Onitsuka executives liked the name, and the meeting progressed. Phil repeated his college project line by line. By the end of it, the Onitsuka employees were so impressed that they themselves proposed that Blue Ribbon Sports should sell Tiger shoes in America. A deal was made. Phil provided them with his address and asked them to send some samples of Tiger training shoes. He was overjoyed. Phil transferred the payment for the shoe samples and returned to the US, waiting for the samples to arrive. However, months passed and no shoes arrived. In response to Phil's letter, Onitsuka assured him that the shoes would arrive soon, but in reality they didn't. Phil hadn't lost hope yet, but he needed a job to survive while waiting for the shoes. So he took up a job as an accountant at a small firm. Almost a year had passed since the meeting with Onitsuka, and Phil had almost given up hope when he received a notice from customs. 12 Tiger shoes had arrived from Japan. Phil collected the shoes and immediately unboxed them. He first showed the shoes to his college coach, Bill Bowerman, and told him about his business plan. Bowerman loved the shoes so much that the next day he offered to become Phil's 50-50 business partner. Phil was surprised by this offer. Throughout his coaching career, if Bowerman was obsessed with anything, it was shoes. For years, he had experimented with shoes and had become an expert in shoe design. His focus was always on making shoes lighter. He often took his students' shoes without asking, tore them apart, made modifications over several days, and returned them. And after his modifications, the athlete's performance improved significantly. Bowerman was not just a genius coach, but also a natural leader. For Phil and other runners, he was like a godlike figure. And now, this same figure wanted to become Phil's business partner. It was a no-brainer. Phil shook hands with Bowerman, and they became 50-50 partners. Phil immediately wrote a letter to Onitsuka, asking for exclusive distribution rights to sell Tiger shoes in Western USA. Along with that, he placed an order for 300 shoes at a total cost of $11,000. This time, the shoes arrived on time, and Blue Ribbon Sports was granted the exclusive rights for Western USA. This was exactly what Phil had been waiting for. He immediately quit his accounting job to focus entirely on the business. He stored the shoes in his parents' basement, which now became the office of Blue Ribbon Sports. Now it was time to sell the shoes. Phil requested several sports shops to sell the Tiger shoes, but they all refused to keep them in their stores. Phil didn't have enough money to open his own shop, so he came up with a solution. He filled his car's trunk with shoe boxes and started showing up at athletic competitions, talking to coaches, athletes, and spectators after the races, presenting his shoes. Phil had tried sales jobs before, but hadn't been successful. However, this time the response from customers shocked him. His shoes were selling like hotcakes. Being an athlete himself, Phil understood the problems of athletes and could easily connect with them. In just 2 months, they sold the first shipment of 300 pairs and directly placed an order for 900 Tiger shoes. However, their total earnings were only $2,000, while the total cost of the order was $3,000. This is why Phil asked the bank for a $1,000 loan for the first time. Seeing Blue Ribbon's strong business potential, the bank approved the loan. Phil finally had a career that he deeply enjoyed, a trusted partner like Bill Bowerman, and a product that was selling on its own. In short, Phil was having a great time. But then a twist occurred in the story. Phil received a letter, which was written by a wrestling coach. The coach claimed that he had recently returned from a meeting with Onitsuka in Japan, and Onitsuka had given him the exclusive distribution rights for Tiger shoes across the United States. The coach ordered Phil to immediately shut down his Tiger shoe business. Phil's business was just 2 months old, but now it was on the verge of closing. He quickly wrote a letter to Onitsuka asking for clarification, but he received no response. So, Phil decided to go to Japan and clarify with Onitsuka what had happened. In his meeting, Phil explained how they had been wronged and presented a strong argument about their sales and future plans. The next day, he had a direct meeting with the owner of the company, Mr. Onitsuka. Upon meeting Phil, for reasons unknown, Mr. Onitsuka began to trust him. Mr. Onitsuka said that Phil's passion reminded him of his younger days, and with that, he gave Phil back the distribution rights for the Western USA. Phil was relieved, but the problems were far from over. After completing its first year in business, Blue Ribbon had sales of 8,000, and they had hired a salesman named Jeff Johnson to expand into other cities. Jeff's unique quality was that, like Phil, he was also a former athlete and extremely passionate about his work. As a result, the second year's sales were expected to double to $16,000. But surprisingly, this became a huge problem for them. Phil wanted to grow rapidly, so as soon as one shipment of shoes was sold out, he would place the next order for double or even triple the quantity. To pay for these orders, they had to reinvest all their profits and also take out loans from the bank. Basically, after 1 year of business, Blue Ribbon had accumulated thousands of dollars in loans, and their cash flow was negative. As a result, the banks refused to give Phil any more loans, and suddenly there was no cash left to run the business. For Blue Ribbon to survive, Phil needed to somehow arrange for money, so he took up an accountant's job again, this time at PWS. He started investing his entire salary into the business. On the other hand, his partner, Bill Bowerman, was working on improving the Tiger shoes. Bowerman realized that Americans' bodies were taller and heavier compared to the Japanese, so their shoes also needed to be different. Bowerman experimented with Tiger shoes by tearing them apart and redesigning them. The turning point came when he combined the best features from various Tiger shoes to create the ultimate distance training shoe for Americans. They named the shoes Cortez. Onitsuka started manufacturing Cortez, and as soon as these shoes hit the American market, they became a super success. Due to Phil's management and Bowerman's shoe designs, within the next 5 years, Tiger shoes had become one of the top shoe brands across America. By 1971, their sales had touched $1.3 million, and the business was doubling every year. With this, Phil quit his job and joined Blue Ribbon full-time. Everything was going perfectly until they got hit with a major blow from Japan. Seeing Blue Ribbon's success, Onitsuka got greedy. They now wanted to keep all the profits from Tiger shoes for themselves. Therefore, they gave Phil an ultimatum. If Phil didn't sell 51% of Blue Ribbon to Onitsuka, they would give the US distribution rights to someone else. Phil was shocked and hurt. This was a huge betrayal. By trying to buy Blue Ribbon, Onitsuka had crossed all limits. So Phil made the biggest decision of his life. Phil gathered his team and told them that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. The time to sell someone else's brand was over. Now it was time to create their own brand. With that, they broke off the partnership with Onitsuka and decided to manufacture their own shoes. The first step was to create a new logo. Phil wanted a logo for their shoe brand that would evoke a sense of running, motion, and victory among athletes. Plus, the logo needed to fit well on the side of a shoe. They hired a graphic design student to design the logo. A few days later, the student showed several designs, and the employees selected one that looked like a curved, thick checkmark. Phil thanked the graphic design student for their help and paid them a $35 fee. After the logo, the next step was choosing a brand name. Several names were suggested, like Falcon and Dimension 6, but then the company's first salesman, Jeff Johnson, told everyone that he had a great name in a dream the night before. That name was Nike. In Greek, the goddess of victory is called Nike, so the name was fitting and accepted. After that, Phil hired a third-party manufacturer to produce the shoes. Nike's manufacturing began, and finally, on May 30th, 1971, Nike was officially launched for the world. But unlike today, at that time, Nike's shoes were so strong and capable that athletes loved wearing them. The brand's shoes were preferred by world-class athletes, so people believed that Nike was the best for sports. Phil's second strategy was to strategically select his sales team. Using the customer base and the advantage of Bowerman's shoe designs, Nike aimed to be the best for sports. Looks and style were never their focus. But in 1980, there was a major change in fashion trends and athletic shoe preferences. Now, people didn't just want a strong, high-performance shoe. They wanted a shoe that was also attractive and stylish. Reebok provided exactly that. In 1986, Nike signed Michael Jordan as its brand ambassador. They also launched a line of basketball sneakers named Air Jordan after Michael Jordan. Before, Air Jordan basketball shoes were quite ordinary and boring, but with their bold colors and stylish designs, Air Jordans changed the trend of basketball shoes overnight. Air Jordan became the historical shoes that kickstarted sneaker culture worldwide. At that time, Michael Jordan was also in phenomenal form. He promoted these shoes by wearing them during games and appearing in Nike advertisements. Due to all of this, Air Jordans became a powerful combination of performance and style. In the first year alone, Nike's Air Jordans were a massive success. Nike continued conquering different countries, expanding into other sportswear, and today, Nike is one of the leading sports brands in the world. If you are passionate about an idea, take calculated risks and execute it. Nike's tagline also says the same, just do it. If you like this video, I recommend watching the next one as well.